Today, we're going to take a journey into the heart of Nigeria. It's a nation of incredible scale, incredible complexity, and we're going to explore how its geography, its history, and its politics all came together to forge this undisputed West African powerhouse.
To really get a handle on Nigeria's importance, you have to start with this number. We're talking about the most populous country in all of Africa, with over 230 million people. Just think about that for a second. That massive population, well, that's the engine behind its power, driving its economy and shaping culture not just on the continent, but across the entire world.
So, here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at Nigeria's land of stark contrasts. Then, we'll dive into its colonial history. After that, we'll cover the turbulent birth of the independent nation. And finally, we'll look at the modern powerhouse it is today.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, a land of contrasts. Because you see, to even begin to understand Nigeria's people, you have to start with the fundamental differences that are literally etched into its landscape.
It's almost like you're looking at two different worlds packed into one country. Down in the south, you've got this humid, tropical climate with dense rainforests, absolutely perfect for cash crops like cocoa and palm oil. But then you travel north, and everything changes. It becomes this dry savanna where staples like peanuts and millet are king. Now, these aren't just farming facts. These are the foundations of totally different economies, different cultures, and different histories that have shaped Nigeria for centuries.
Okay, so that's the land. But what happens when outside forces enter the picture? Well, that brings us to Section 2, and how this land was changed forever. This is the era of empire and exploitation, when European interests first arrived on the West African coast.
British involvement didn't just happen overnight. It evolved over centuries. It all began way back in the 1600s with the horrific transatlantic slave trade. Then, after Britain abolished that trade in 1807, the focus shifted to resources, things like palm oil. By the late 1800s, this massive commercial operation, the Royal Niger Company, consolidated power, and that really paved the way for the British government to just step in, take direct control, and create the colony of Nigeria.
And this is absolutely crucial to understand. British rule was not uniform at all. Sure, they built things like railways, schools, and government buildings, but they heavily favored the South. That's where their economic interests were strongest. This deliberate policy of uneven development created these deep regional imbalances, and that, right there, planted the seeds for so much of the political conflict that was to come.
And those very tensions bring us right into our third section, independence and civil war. This is the story of a nation breaking free, only to be immediately tested by the divisions of its past. This really was a nation forged in conflict.
Picture this, 1960. It was a moment of just immense hope and pride. After decades of colonial rule and a powerful nationalist movement, Nigeria finally got its independence. A brand new era had begun.
But as the celebrations started to fade, a huge question mark began to hang over the new nation. After a century shaped by outside forces and these deep internal divisions, could this new nation actually hold together? Did independence really bring stability?
And the answer, tragically, was a resounding no. The years right after independence were filled with these fierce political fights between groups representing different ethnic and regional interests. The whole situation just deteriorated so fast, leading to a military coup in 1966, and then, just a year later, the country plunged into a devastating civil war.
This conflict, which is known as the Nigerian Civil War, or sometimes the Biafran War, raged for 3 years, from 1967 to 1970. It was a brutal fight for the very soul of the nation, and its roots ran deep into those ethnic and regional divisions that had only been sharpened by that colonial legacy.
The human cost, well, it's just staggering. While about 100,000 soldiers died in combat, an estimated 2 million civilians lost their lives. And get this, many of them didn't die from bullets. They died from famine and starvation caused by the war. It's a number that just speaks to the profound trauma of this period.
So, what happened after the war? Well, the conflict's aftermath shaped Nigeria for an entire generation. Instead of a return to democracy, the end of the war ushered in several decades of military rule. The government was controlled by the armed forces right up until the very end of the 20th century.
And that brings us to our final section, a modern powerhouse. Here, we're going to look at Nigeria's journey since it finally returned to democracy, exploring the immense potential that exists right alongside some very persistent and very serious challenges.
So in 1999,
Nigeria makes this historic transition back to a democratic political system. And since then, the country has held regular elections, which is a remarkable achievement. But the path has not been smooth. Not at all. Political tensions are still very real, and corruption continues to be a major roadblock to stability and development.
On top of that, the nation has also faced significant security threats, most notably from the extremist group Boko Haram. They're based in the north. That same region historically impacted by that uneven colonial development, and their stated goal is to overthrow the government and impose their own strict ideology. It's a direct challenge to the Nigerian state.
I'm sure you remember this. The world was really jolted to attention back in 2014 by one of the group's most infamous acts, the kidnapping of 276 schoolgirls from the town of Chibok. This event drew global condemnation and really shined a light on the brutal reality of the conflict and the group's violent opposition to education, especially for girls.
And so we kind of end where we began, with a nation of incredible scale, a nation forged by its geography and by empire, tested by a brutal civil war, and now navigating the very complex path of a modern democracy. Its potential is absolutely undeniable, yet its challenges remain profound. So the question for Nigeria, and really for the world, is this: what does the future hold for this West African powerhouse?